Hello, everyone. I'm Bobtheorc, and on this 4th of July, I thought I'd sit down and remind everybody why we are Americans, what makes us Americans, and how we got here. And maybe we can talk a little bit about where we're going in the future. I'd like to begin by reading the Declaration of Independence. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and the nature's God entitles them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer when evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for the future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such it is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former system of government. The history of the present King of Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent shall be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument, introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government. For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with the power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is, at this time, transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy sacredly paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of the attempts by their legislature to extend unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf in the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiances to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract allies, establish commerce, and do all other things and acts which independent states may of right do, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we must mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. For those of you who would say that these words were written over 250 years ago, and that the times are vastly different now, I'd like to remind you a few things. The primary problem that America faced back then is very similar to the primary problems we face today. The government in 1776 did not represent the will of the people, and the rulers lived far away in completely different conditions. How is that different from the elites who rule us today and bear no favor towards us? They were concerned about an unfair two-tiered justice system where rulings would be made up at the convenience of the ruling elites, the king and his governors. And how is that so different from what we see in many cases today? The American colonies at the time had no control over their borders, just as we have no control over our borders now. They had no control over their immigration, just as we have no control over our immigration now. They had no control over their commerce and their private businesses, just like in many cases, especially under COVID, we had no control over our businesses in many parts of the country. Bureaucrats who were not beholden to the will of the people and suffered no repercussion for their actions could do as they will. And there are a lot of similarities between what we face now and what we faced back then. The difference is that now, instead of being ruled by a foreign king, we are ruled by bureaucrats and elites in Washington, D.C., which in many ways is just as foreign of a country as the rest of America. And they are not beholden to us, they're beholden to the donors. So it's important that we sit down and remember that the founding of our country is that we are all equal in the eyes of God, and our rights come from God and from nature, and not from the will of our betters, for they are really no better than us. And ultimately, what makes an American is that we choose our own destiny, and we choose to live our life as we will it, not based on the will of others. And when the government starts to constrain the freedoms for their own benefit and against the benefit of the people, we start to see some parallels to the time of the American independence. And that's what causes such turmoil today. Bureaucrats and government representatives are seldom held accountable for the bad things they do. And the people really have no way to redress their grievances. They can't petition the government because it's so big and moves under its own momentum. How many people want foreign wars? How many people want the government to print endless amounts of money, creating huge inflation? How many people want the government to regulate businesses that favor the big corporations and hurt small businesses? How many people want tens of millions of illegals coming across the border, or even tens of millions of legitimate migrants coming in and competing for their jobs? How many people want to see a shrinking economy or constraints on their personal freedoms and their rights to choose what they do with their own body? And these are things that both liberals and conservatives can generally agree on, though we're often divided by wedge issues that try to divide us from seeing that we're all getting screwed by the same people. So in this 4th of July, I advise everybody to talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and find the common ground that binds us together as a united civilization. Because the government's not going to save us. They're largely the problem. And any politician, Democrat, Republican, or Independent, who promises that just a little bit more government, give me a little bit more power, and I can fix it, they're obviously lying. The only real solution is you have to take matters into your own hands to better yourself, better your lives, and improve your local community. And it's okay to be independent and difficult, because at the end of the day, Americans are independent and difficult people. So I wish everybody a happy 4th of July. Don't lose hope. And make your voices heard. Whatever your opinions are, make your voices heard. Because at the end of the day, we all generally want the same thing. We all want life, we all want liberty, and we all want to pursue our own happiness. That doesn't mean that we're guaranteed to achieve these things, but we have the right to try and maybe succeed and maybe fail, but it's up to us to try. So happy 4th of July, and I'll see you guys all later. You have a great evening. Goodbye. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did like it, subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends. You can also check out my website, bobtheorc.com, where you can download a free copy of my dad's book and some other things. Have a nice day. Goodbye.